What if I told you that Ferrari may have already jeopardized their 2025 season because of a fundamental design flaw, one that neither Hamilton nor Leclerc can hide? What Frederic Vasseur uncovered in Hungary was so serious that it shook the very foundations of the SF25 project and potentially the future direction of the team. Hungary has always been the type of circuit that ruthlessly exposes technical shortcomings. It's a track that magnifies every weakness in a car's concept. The narrow asphalt, a relentless sequence of linked corners, and an almost non-existent main straight demand a perfect compromise between aerodynamic load and traction. And it was here, under these unforgiving conditions, that the SF25 began showing alarming symptoms. Following the race, Vasseur called for an unusually thorough inspection of Hamilton's car, not just the standard post-race checks for tire wear or engine telemetry, but a full disassembly of key structural components. What they found was worse than anyone inside Maranello had anticipated: a critical weakness in the rear suspension. And this wasn't a one-off failure. It was a flaw baked into the design itself. The defect revealed itself as a progressive loss of grip as rear tire temperatures rose, creating oscillations in the rear axle that forced the drivers to constantly adjust their lines just to keep the car under control. Even more troubling, the wind tunnel data and CFD simulations didn't match the car's real behavior on track, a clear sign that the correlation between theory and reality had broken down. To make matters worse, engineers found evidence that the internal cooling system wasn't efficiently managing heat flow to the rear brakes. In certain phases of the race, this led to temperature spikes that altered tire pressures and compromised race pace. This wasn't just an engineering problem. It was a direct blow to Ferrari's faith in the SF25. The sting was even sharper because the team had already invested heavily in a major suspension upgrade introduced in Belgium. And this wasn't something that could be fixed with minor tweaks between sessions. The issue was deeply rooted in the car's architecture, with ripple effects across other interconnected systems. Any fix risked harming other areas of performance. Vasseur realized in that moment that Ferrari's championship fight wouldn't just be against McLaren and Red Bull. It would be against the SF25's own DNA. The team faced a harsh choice: stick with a concept that promised top-end speed and aerodynamic efficiency, but sacrificed mechanical stability, or abandon the plan and make drastic changes mid-season. The consequences weren't only sporting, they were strategic and political. Such a decision could effectively declare the 2025 project dead before the halfway point of the season. Ironically, qualifying in Hungary had sparked hope. Charles Leclerc, with a near-perfect lap, took pole position ahead of rivals with seemingly more balanced cars. For a brief moment, it looked like Ferrari might land a strategic blow in the title race. For the first 40 laps, everything ran to plan: clean starts, smart traffic management, careful tire degradation control, and a pace that kept both McLarens at bay. The SF25 seemed responsive and stable for Leclerc. Then came the final pit stop, and the illusion crumbled within minutes. What followed was a dramatic technical collapse that stunned even Ferrari's most seasoned engineers. A 2-second advantage over Oscar Piastri turned into a deficit of more than 40 seconds by the checkered flag. In the final stint, Leclerc's pace dropped off by a staggering 1.5 seconds per lap compared to Piastri, and alarmingly, he was slower than he'd been at the start of the race, when carrying 75 kilograms of fuel. This wasn't driver error, nor was it due to changing track conditions. The root cause traced back to one of Formula One's most feared issues: excessive plank wear. This wooden board under the car's floor ensures the vehicle maintains the legal minimum ride height. If it wears beyond the limit, disqualification is automatic. Remembering Hamilton's disqualification in China, Ferrari made a last-minute call, raised the ride height, and increased tire pressures for the final stint. The move avoided a rules breach, but it shattered the SF25's aerodynamic balance, reducing cornering load and overheating the tires. Publicly, Ferrari blamed a chassis issue. But inside the paddock, the prevailing theory was blunt. Ferrari had been running the car too low for speed in qualifying and the early stints, and were forced to raise it late to avoid penalties, destroying their pace in the process. The change disrupted the delicate harmony between suspension, diffuser, and rear aero package, leaving Leclerc defenseless. The bigger problem? Ferrari was now trapped in a strategic corner. They could push the car to its limits with aggressive low-ride height setups for qualifying and early race pace, or play it safe to avoid technical infringements, at the cost of losing ground to McLaren and Red Bull. Hungary proved they hadn't found a middle ground, and any wrong choice could mean the difference between fighting for victory or falling off the podium in a matter of laps. For Lewis Hamilton, Hungary wasn't just a disappointing result. It was a head-on collision with the deepest flaws in the SF25's design. He'd arrived in Budapest with a mix of optimism and urgency, encouraged by flashes of competitiveness in earlier races. He believed that, with his experience, he could adapt the car to his style. But the weekend made it clear, this wasn't going to be a matter of a few setup tweaks. This was a full-scale technical war. From the first practice, Hamilton reported unpredictable rear-end behavior, traction instability that robbed him of the confidence to attack fast corners. Setup changes with his race engineer didn't solve it. In every long run, rear tire wear soared, and heat buildup became unmanageable, forcing him to slow earlier than planned. The most frustrating part? It wasn't an isolated problem. It was a direct result of the structural defect Vasseur had identified. Hamilton tried adjusting his driving style, braking earlier, softening turn-ins, to preserve grip. But every change reduced his attacking potential. The car was asking him to drive defensively, completely at odds with the aggressive style that's defined his career. Each lap became a containment exercise, focused on avoiding mistakes rather than chasing overtakes. Sources say that after the race, Hamilton spoke directly to Vasseur and the technical team. This wasn't a heated outburst, it was a precise breakdown of the issues he'd experienced and the changes he believed were necessary. Rear suspension redesign, aeroflow adjustments, and cooling system rework, all interlinked in the SF25's performance puzzle. Psychologically, it was a blow. Hamilton had been signed as the talisman to lead Ferrari back to glory. But Hungary made him realize the challenge was far greater than he expected. The bond with the team was still there, but now underpinned by a sense of urgency. Every race without a fix was a lost opportunity against a dominant McLaren and a vulnerable Red Bull. The risk now is twofold: a frustrated Hamilton and a Leclerc who, despite his speed, could start doubting the project's long-term viability. Vasseur's revelation in Hungary wasn't just a technical red flag. It marked a crossroads for Ferrari's entire 2025 campaign. In F1, a flawed design concept can't be fixed with setup changes or small updates. It often requires a total rethink for the next year's car. But Ferrari can't afford to wait until 2026. The pressure, both internal and external, is immense. Every lost point brings McLaren and Red Bull closer to shutting Ferrari out of the championship fight before the season's final stages. The team faces a brutal choice. Conservative route: patch the rear suspension issue with setup compromises and small reinforcements. Accept some performance loss on certain tracks, but avoid the risks of mid-season overhauls. Aggressive route: implement major design changes that could transform the car's DNA, risking reliability and balance, but potentially restoring race-winning pace. This decision won't be left to the technical team alone. In Maranello, such calls involve senior management, strategy heads, and even Ferrari's corporate board. The stakes touch every corner of the organization. The prestige of signing Hamilton, Leclerc's commitment and morale, the sponsors' expectations, and Ferrari's public image as a historic team that must fight at the front. Inside the paddock, Hungary is already being talked about as a potential turning point. If Ferrari can implement an effective fix in the coming races, they could turn this crisis into a story of resilience and innovation, sending a clear message to their rivals. But if they fail, 2025 could go down as a season where promise turned to frustration long before the final flag.